Daniel Ricciardo may have only landed a third driver spot at Red Bull, but it doesn't take long for fortunes to change in F1. So Sergio Perez has to start performing now, because Ricciardo could actually become the second driver at Red Bull. No, seriously, even though this might seem like a far-fetched concept, especially before the season has started, there's some truth to it as well. Let's take Perez's performances, for example. The Mexican had his strongest F1 season to date, as he won 2 races on his way to third place in the championship. At the same time, though, he was so far behind his frankly dominant teammate that it doesn't seem that impressive. Like, if Max won the championship by such a massive margin, then surely Sergio should have at least been P2, right? Not to mention, he has a tendency to fall into the second driver role at times. Of course, it's not like he wants to play second fiddle to the reigning champ, but the fact that Checo can't maintain the level of his Dutch teammate on non-street circuits has gotten a bit too obvious at this point.
Another driver sliding around COTA with Carlos Sainz, the Spaniard once again demonstrating.
Now, you could say that he's exactly the type of driver that Red Bull wants. After all, he's sort of gotten into that Valtteri Bottas wingman role at the team. And if he's earning consistent points and not hurting his teammate, then he's got to be the perfect fit, right? Well, in theory, yes. That said, there is another major issue that could lead to the Mexican driver's departure from Red Bull Racing. Yeah, it's all the turmoil from last season. Now, if you don't remember, there was something really strange back and forth between Checo and Verstappen last year, something that Ricciardo could capitalize on.
When you're lining up on the grid.
Well, I imagine they'll be starting to feel the adrenaline as they anticipate the...
Just take the Brazilian Grand Prix, for example. Max was supposed to let Perez through to P6 so he could cement that second place in the Drivers' Championship. But rather than helping his teammate, the Dutchman refused to make way and instead got mad at the team for suggesting the move. Back then, people thought he was being childish. Later on, however, it was revealed that this internal feud has been going on for a while now. In fact, the whole thing apparently dated all the way back to Monaco when Sergio crashed during qualifying to get the pole position. And that's the sort of infighting that Red Bull doesn't want. After all, they've seen it in the past with so many of their other driver pairings. Honestly, it's almost funny just how every single Red Bull pairing just falls into the same trap. But hey, wasn't Ricciardo the same back in the day? How would his arrival help? Well, yes, but you've also got to consider that the Honey Badger is a very different person these days. He's much more experienced and composed and is still on great terms with Verstappen. Still, the notion that he's somehow going to take Perez's seat after a year in the third driver's seat seems a bit silly, right? Sure, it does right now for former F1 driver David Coulthard. However, this is very much possible as he thinks that Perez is a substitute driver at Red Bull.
The air! Sainz goes past, Leclerc goes past, Hamilton keeps the place.
Yeah, that sort of claim can give you whiplash because, it's spicy. Though if you really think, it does sort of make sense too. After all, as I've already mentioned earlier, Checo just isn't fast enough to be considered crucial by the team. In fact, Coulthard also echoed this exact sentiment in his BBC Sport interview recently. He said that for the Mexican to actually compete against Max, there's got to be some major software update. Because when you're this far behind, improving a few corners or smaller things like that is just not going to be enough.
He's struggling a bit in these opening laps and barging wheels there with Mick Schumacher.
He compared it to baking a cake, as according to him, if you use the same ingredients twice, you're gonna get the same cake. So to get something different, you gotta switch up the ingredients as well. Of course, Perez has all the data in the world available to him. He can see where Verstappen is quicker and what he needs to do to replicate that. And if he manages to lift his performance to that sort of level, then he's looking at a world championship. Though if he doesn't, then, well, he's going to be another one of those second drivers who just win a couple races here and there and remain under their teammates' shadows.
That's George Russell out of this race, who's finished in the top 5 in every race this season.
As a matter of fact, Coulthard actually gave his own example while talking about this, because according to him, you just have to leave no stone unturned in your performance. Now, DC actually went into detail about his time at McLaren and talked about how you've got to give it your all when you're up against world champions. Of course, he knows it all since he was up against the mighty Mika Hakkinen and the ice-cold Kimi Räikkönen.
The Japanese Grand Prix is go once more. Verstappen leads the way.
So for him, it was all about being consistent and fully dedicated to your racecraft. In fact, the 51-year-old even mentioned how in 9 years at McLaren, he did every test and never missed a race, even when he felt terrible. After all, he knew that the minute he'd leave the seat for the reserve driver, it became an opportunity for that driver to show how good he was. So if he never let the third driver in the car, then the third driver would never be able to show his chops. Yeah, I know, genius plan.
Behind George Russell, Lewis Hamilton comes onto the track. But is that the hard?
Seriously, you've got to defend your territory in Formula One. Though, of course, F1 teams work a bit differently these days, as they can sometimes let a reserve driver go out for a session. With that said, I don't think Red Bull's going to just let Daniel get into Sergio's seat for even a practice reason. Why? Well, you see, the Honey Badger's got a limiting factor, and it is the fact that he isn't a youngster anymore.
This year's Williams drive, George Russell.
They're going for it. Max Verstappen on the inside.
Now, usually, Formula One teams have to let a reserve driver do at least one free practice session during the season. But the issue is, that requirement is only limited to young drivers. And since Daniel's now 33, he doesn't fit the bill anymore. So to actually compete for Perez's spot on the team, he's got to pull something really special out of the bag. Of course, everyone knows that he's capable of that, well, in theory anyway.
To his wing, and has Lewis Hamilton got a puncture?
Hamilton's moving all over the place, wasn't he? Really struggling.
Then again, when you look at his performances over the past few years, they don't fill you with confidence. And for this very reason, Coulthard believes that the Australian's got to keep pushing or else his Grand Prix career could very well be over. That being said, there is still one silver lining for Ricciardo, because even if he's old, he's still got all the tools for success at his disposal. I mean, sure, it's all doom and gloom right now for the Honey Badger, but if you really think about it, he is at the best team in Formula One right now.
DRS closing in on Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton leading the race. Verstappen goes down.
Like, even if he doesn't get many chances to get on the racetrack, he'll still have plenty of opportunities to show he's got the pace to belong in Formula One. In fact, according to Coulthard, he's got the opportunity of a lifetime here as he enters this rebuilding phase of his career. And if he can truly get his mind back to whatever he was doing during his successful years, then this move could reignite his career. Besides, everyone knows he's got that pace locked in there somewhere. I mean, we even saw flashes of it during last season. At this point, it's all about unlocking it and unleashing that desire that he's got. So it's going to be fascinating to see how the 2023 season pans out, and if Ricciardo is able to capitalize on Perez's weaknesses and get that Red Bull seat. See you in the next one.